Are you following God's plan for your relationship and your eventual marriage? Well, we're going to talk about that today. What is God's plan? Do you believe in it? And are you following it? And I have a special guest. So stay. Welcome to the Secret Formula of Femininity for women who want to live a more feminine, fun, and fabulous life. I'm Dr. Nicole Monteiro, your host on this weekly journey to unlocking your inner radiance, nurturing fulfilling relationships, and becoming the best version of yourself. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Nicole, your guide on this journey to your feminine essence. And welcome back not only to this episode, but to season 2, where we're going deeper on the topics of love, marriage, relationships, and your femininity. And I have some amazing guests. And specifically today, we're going to talk about what is a kingdom marriage, what is God's plan for your relationship and your marriage, and how do you know if you're on the right track? I am so excited to bring Keisha Williams. She's an amazing relationship coach and therapist, and she's got some really great insights on how you need to think about your relationship. I think a lot of us are thinking about it in the wrong way. That's why we're running into all of these problems and we're arguing on the internet and all of this nonsense and chaos is happening. So we want to get rid of the fluff. We want to get to the heart of the matter. So please join me in welcoming Keisha Williams. She is a relationship coach and marriage therapist who equips couples with tools for a successful, healthy union. Welcome, Keisha. I'm so excited to have you. And what's the name of your practice? You are a private practice owner?
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
My practice is Journey to Better Counseling Services.
Okay, and we're going to hear all about that a little bit later. But first, Keisha, I always am curious about people's stories. I believe that we end up doing what we were called to do, what we were meant to do. And it's always interesting how we got to that point. So, why are you a marriage and relationship therapist and coach? Why are you doing what you do and helping couples in the way that you do?
Yeah, I love that question. So I kind of fell into it. So initially when I was pursuing counseling as my career path, I really had a heart and mindset that I was going to work with kids, right? Like I was like, oh, the children of the future, that's where I'm going to really pour my energy and my focus into, right? To really impact tomorrow, the future.
Mhm.
But along that journey, as a therapist, you're really challenged to know yourself, right? To get in therapy yourself, to understand your biases, so that you can be a better, well-rounded clinician. Well, through that self-discovery, I realized the reason why I was so focused on serving children was because of an insecurity. Right. So, so I started my career really young. I already look young. Probably, you
Mhm.
probably couldn't guess how old I am. Right. But I've been a clinician for a good
Good
15
genes.
years.
Uh-huh.
Thank you. Thank you. Tell me what I appreciate that. But yeah, so I started my career really young. And I didn't think that I would be taken serious as a clinician. So I was timid with working with adults.
Mm.
Right. Yeah. So because of that young face, even though people will interact with me and they're like, oh my gosh, you know so much, or you like seem so wise. Like even though I would get that kind of feedback, just like having a young face made me insecure. So over my career, just different jobs that I had, it morphed. The clientele, my demographic morphed. So I went from serving just the kiddos to working with the family unit. And then I started working with parents, really trying to help them just pour into their children better. And through that experience, that's when I learned that I was really good at working with couples.
Mm.
So that's what I mean. I kind of fell into it. So I just kind of like picked it up and started doing it more. And God really helped me in my own marital journey. I've been married since 2011, so however long it is, child, 13 years, I think, this year.
Uh-huh.
But just my own marital trials and things like that, and like wanting to be, a really good wife and wanting to like be able to empathize with my couples that I was serving. I just started delving into research of like, okay, what are these dynamics? What is healthy? What is unhealthy? What are some habits? All of that stuff. And through that, I ended up getting specialty training through the Gottman method of couples
Me
counseling.
too.
And
Yeah. Study
yes,
Gottman train.
I didn't know that. Yeah, that's how I ended up here. And now it's just like my passion. It's like all I want to do. I mean, I see individuals as well, but I'm really passionate about couples work.
I absolutely love that. And it's just a testament to how we all end up where we're supposed to be, including you and I having this conversation. And I think a lot of people don't know that therapists and coaches, it's not that we don't have any problems. It's just that we're highly trained, first of all, to be self aware and
Yes,
also to really be observant and help people peel back the layers of theirs. So we're not perfect. Um,
that part.
and it's so funny how, like, I'm sure just listening to your story, um, we just hit 14 years. I just had my anniversary, and
Oh, happy anniversary.
thank you. And isn't it interesting how you learn so much about yourself and your own relationship through this work?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Like, oh, I do that. I should stop. Yeah.
Yes, you like, "Let me stop being" you know what? Like, doing this work will help you work on your relationship because 'cause you're like,
It
"How
will.
am I sitting here telling people about being
Get
healthy
right.
and I'm being toxic?" So
Yes, you gotta get
so
right.
Keisha, I loved your description when I read your stuff just about talking about a kingdom marriage. And I'm Muslim, you're Christian, but I think
Yes.
what's really interesting is this idea that marriage is driven by something outside of just the two people, just the couple, that there's
Yes.
another purpose. So tell us, like, what is a kingdom marriage? And yeah, just start from there. Explain to us what is your understanding of a kingdom marriage?
Yes, I love this question. So I like to speak from the point that marriage was God's idea,
Mm.
right? So in the beginning, God created man and woman, in his image. And when I teach what a kingdom marriage is, I really teach it that it's modeling a person's individual relationship with God, right? This is why, like, at least in Christian culture, why we are called the bride of Christ, right? And that's one of the reasons why divorce isn't really encouraged is because God would never divorce his children. God would never divorce us. He would never divorce his bride. So all of those qualities that God pursues in a healthy relationship with us is what a kingdom marriage is to model. So when you understand that marriage is God's idea, he had an intention behind how he created the woman, how he created the man. Then when we walk in and operate in those purposes, we glorify him first and foremost. And then we get the benefit, like, oh, I am happy in this place. I am enjoying this place. And you're driven by purpose.
Wow. So because I think the modern well, you tell me what you think the modern view of
Sure.
marriage is, but my understanding just from hearing conversations and the chatter that goes on in the internet, the modern view of marriage is just about those two people. But you're saying
Mhm.
it's so much bigger than that.
So much bigger.
Mm.
Yeah. So to your point, I think the modern way of looking at marriage and why we see such high divorce rates is because people are just trying to be happy within themselves. Like, you were supposed to be here to make me happy. And the
Mm.
minute you stop making me happy, I don't want to be with you no more. Like, you're not
It's
serving
over.
me. Right. Yes. So it's like, hold on, what now? And there's a lot of selfishness that I think is connected to the modern way of doing marriage. And I think that's why we see so much divorce.
Mm. So when you see couples, do you lay that out for them? Like they're coming in like he's not doing the dishes, she's not doing that. And what do you say? Like, oh, you need to think about what God would say. Like, how do you present this to them?
Mhm. So first and foremost, I'll say this: not all of my couples that I serve are actually Christian or identify as
Okay.
Christian,
Hmm.
right? And there's boundaries in being a therapist. I get to
Hmm.
show up differently whether I am serving as a therapist, a marriage, counselor, or if I'm serving as a relationship coach.
Hmm.
My ethics are very different in those
Yes.
two scopes of practice.
And
So as
people
a
need to
therapist,
understand that, right? For those of
yes.
us who do both, and that we're very mindful of the differences and the boundaries and the rules.
Yes, ma'am.
Mhm.
So as a therapist, under those ethics, I can't really say like I am Christian. You have to look at it as a God I don't have permission to do that, right? Now, and if I get an invitation from someone saying, "Hey, I'm really looking for a Christian-based therapist who's gonna operate under the principles of the Bible," okay, then I can operate and flow in that, because you've given me permission and there's no ethical threat, right? But as a relationship coach, most people are attracted to me because of that Christian leverage that I have in my practice. So in that regard, I'm coming in off the bat and
Okay.
challenging, like, are you, looking at this from God's point of view? And one of my favorite questions to ask all new couples, whether this is in marriage counseling or in relationship coaching, is what's the purpose of your marriage? What's the purpose of your
Mm,
union?
mhm,
And
mhm.
that's kind of how I can gauge the mindset couples have about their relationship and how each partner should operate.
So do how do couples typically respond? Are there some people who have no sense that there may be a purpose outside of their own individual happiness? And how do they respond?
Absolutely. Yeah. Most people respond with, I never thought about that.
Good
And I would
question.
imagine most of your viewers are probably thinking, like, oh, I've never asked myself that.
Mhm.
Right. I just think that that's common again, which is what modern society is pushing, right? Like, just be with somebody who's going to make you happy and who's going to complete you. But when you look at it like, oh, God completes me, and I have a purpose in God's kingdom to bring God glory and to serve in my natural purposes, then when you are with someone, your union works together to do that. Right. I like to say that there's a call on each of your individual lives. Then when you come together, you serve a greater force or a greater purpose in the kingdom. So you're asking, how do couples respond when I bring that
Yeah.
perspective? I think that's the entire work, not the entire, but I think that's a
Mhm.
lot of the work in counseling, right? So I find that people are usually receptive because they're trying to figure out, why am I stuck? Why do I
Uh-huh.
keep hitting this wall? So once they have this consideration of, like, do you know there's a greater purpose? And maybe if you're operating in that, like, we might reach healthy. I think people are curious to listen. So I think that's the response that I usually get back of, like, okay, tell me more. Yeah. So I just bring
Yeah.
that to the table.
I find that and I'm curious of if you've seen this, like, even just from a secular perspective, if you're talking to people like, okay, marriage can help build generational wealth, or it
Mm,
can help bring a level of like emotional stability versus jumping from this to this. Like,
yeah.
just getting people, even if they might not even identify in a religious way, to understand because look, marriage is a commitment. And if you
Okay.
just got to get mad and walk away, it's like, "Okay, this thing would never work."
Right, right. No, I 100% agree. One of the things that I like to kind of buy into, if you will, is the second most important question or decision that you can make in your life is who you marry. Right?
Mm.
Because to your point, when you think about creating generational wealth and breaking generational curses, if you're not walking in purpose with someone with that common mindset, maybe you're going to stay trapped. You're not, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you're with somebody who has a broke mindset, for example,
Mhm.
and they're like, oh, my mama and daddy ain't never had nothing. I ain't never gonna have nothing. I'm just gonna try to give me a, baseline job. And as long as I'm out here doing what I'm supposed to do, keep my head down, I'm gonna be all right. And you're like, no, what? I'm trying to live elevated. That's
Yes.
not gonna work for you. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that who you marry can have a huge impact on what future and better and hope looks like for you.
Now, what's the first? Because you said it's the second. I love to listen. You said this is the second
I love
most
that.
important decision. What's the first one?
Yeah. So faith to me,
Uh-huh, uh-huh,
right? So,
uh-huh.
like, decided to give your life to Christ or following your faith, I think is the most biggest decision that you can make about your life, right? Because again, we're talking about greater purpose. There's no greater purpose than, following the one that created you, right? Like, you can be wise in your own eyes, or you can live a surrendered life that can be healing just in of itself of, like, oh wait, when I know that I was created on purpose for a purpose, then I'm less likely to entertain thoughts of suicide. I'm less likely to fall into depression because I'm walking in purpose and I'm not consumed with my mistakes. I'm realizing that I was forgiven by someone that created me, who has good plans for me, right? And I'm not too worried about the future, which I say is a pathway to anxiety. It shapes your life. So yeah, faith is the first most important
Yeah.
decision.
And I know, we both look at the research and it's clear that people who practice a faith and are connected socially to their faith community are healthier in so many different indices, whether it's physical health, emotional. We know there's a loneliness crisis, like in the Western world and throughout the world. And so being connected to something greater than yourself, a faith community, and practicing is an excellent coping tool. But then, even with the marriage research, right? Like, you have a sense that you can weather some of the storms of a marriage or a long-term relationship and not feel so, because it could feel like a roller coaster, like you mad one day, the next day, but
Yeah.
so you need something to steady you and ground you.
Yes. Yes. So good. I agree.
Now, do you work mostly with African American couples, different ethnicities? Do you do interfaith? Like, what's the
Yeah.
what kind of clientele do you work with?
Yeah, so I would say in terms of ethnicity, my demographics has been all over the place. There's
Mhm.
no um true consistency there. I will say a lot of African American couples want a black therapist because they're saying like I need somebody that can relate and understand my
Mhm.
cultural background. So in that regard, I am highly sought out by
Mhm.
black couples, black and brown couples. Um, but that's not all I see.
Mhm.
And as far as like interfaith, I don't work too much. I don't have many clients who I've had maybe a handful in all of the years that I've been in practice, but I don't see a lot of interfaith couples that I do work with.
Okay. Do you remember if you saw any particular challenges with the interfaith couples that you didn't like? Were both had faith, but it was a different religious practice. And did you notice anything like
Yes. Yes. So the particular couple that I'm thinking about, the husband, he was the one pursuing. So the wife was Christian, and the husband was like, "Listen, we don't have to believe the same thing for us to be together because I know that I want you, and you know that you want
that? Mhm.
me." So and they both kind of agreed in that regard. But there are when we talk about like faith being your biggest, what in my opinion, the biggest decision that you can make, there's different foundations that you have,
Mhm.
right? And we know, I'm sure you're familiar with the Gottman research that gridlocks come from those foundational differences,
Values.
right?
Yeah.
Yes, the values that you have. So that's kind of the stuff that I have seen with the few couples that I've worked with that have had the
Mhm.
interfaith.
Uh-huh. Okay, so that's a good thing to know. Not that there can't be interfaith couples, but knowing that like when two people are strongly rooted in their value system, and then if they bump heads in that, that could be a challenge.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that
Mhm.
creates gridlocks.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So I want to talk a little bit about femininity. So my podcast, my platform is all about femininity and helping women to
Yes, ma'am.
really feel comfortable and tap into their feminine essence. I have observed, and I'm curious about what you've observed, that many women struggle with balancing strength and femininity in relationships, especially quote unquote modern women. We're out
Mhm.
here, we're working, we're pursuing careers, we're leading, we're doing all of these things and things that require a certain level of putting yourself out there, strength, ambition, achievement, and so forth. And I see women struggle with that balance or just what to make of it. Is that something that you've seen in relationships? And if we're talking about from your perspective, kingdom marriages, is there
Mhm.
specific, like, um, scriptural guidance on that?
Sure. Yes. First and foremost, I definitely see a lot of that. Um, and I think that it is the imbalance is scriptural based, right? Like this, I would argue that the whole reason why there was the fall of man was because of that imbalance, right? Like I created Eve as a helpmate, and people think that let's do some clarifying here.
'Cause you
People
look, you
think
know
that
what the reaction will be.
people think like, "Oh, I'm here just for that man. I'm the weaker link." Now, hold on now, right? Because we take things out of context. And that's not what was actually meant, right? When that was spoken by God or when that happened. So I to go back to your point about the imbalance, I think that was part of it that we saw in the Garden of Eden, right? That there was an imbalance that God created Eve for a purpose, but she was deceived by the serpent, right? By the devil, or Satan. And now here we are repeating that generational curse.
Mm.
Is what I will call it. Okay. So that's how I see it. So when you have a woman that is in today's world out in front of her husband trying to like do all of the things, right? Because of the ambition and all of that stuff. And the husband is showing up and not being her covering, that's when we see a problem, right? Because the man was created to be a form of a covering for that woman. And I think over time, men have been convinced to think that, oh, if I provide financially, that's all I got to do to be a covering. Wrong, friend. I'm going to tell you that it's much more than that, right? So even when we look at how the Bible says two scriptures I'm a reference, when it says that a man will leave his mother and father to join with his wife and become one flesh. That's a covering that happens. That's a covenant relationship that happens. So there's so much more of just providing financially for somebody, or a wife, that is part of your role as a husband. And when a woman is nurtured well by a man who's covering her, spiritually covering her, then she can operate more freely in femininity. Does that
Mm.
make sense?
Yes, yes. I'm always struck whenever I have like interfaith conversations about the similarities because, from an Islamic point of view, there are clearly outlined roles and responsibilities, for men and women, particularly in a marriage, which is the legitimized relationship for building a family foundation and so forth. And so much of it is around the woman's protection. And a lot of times people will focus, like you said, on financial provision, like, well, the man has to provide. It is so much more, right? And they are created to be like the coolness in each other's eyes, like a mercy to each
Mhm.
other. And there's specific types of ways that they cover and protect each other. But
Mhm.
it's almost like we've lost respect for the distinction, right,
Come
between the
on.
2.
Mm.
So it's like, well,
Yeah.
and then it's like, well, why are you in a relationship if you want, like, if you yeah, it's a whole thing. Look, I know you could go
Okay.
into it, right?
Yes. But that's the problem, right? Like people don't know like what the significance of this covenantal relationship is, right?
Mhm.
So when we're following this, like, oh, we have so many things, we have so many hobbies that we like to do in common. And, like, oh, you make me so happy because you're so funny and you're so cute. So I just want to be like, well, you just on that surface level, baby, you're not ready for battle. Because one thing that I will
Mm.
tell you that what's going to happen in a kingdom relationship is you gonna get tried by the forces of evil.
Mm.
So if you don't have purpose backing you, you gonna fold every time. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that I love what you were saying about like there's a different way that we're supposed to cover and protect. Absolutely. So in Christian um faith, we're taught to renew your mind with the word of God, right?
Mhm.
Why do you think that's so important? Because you're going to be exposed, inundated. We see it today all day long. We're inundated with social media,
Internet, yeah.
with what's happening on TikTok. Oh, they said the doctor on Facebook said, like, what?
So I'm gonna break up with you because I heard that.
You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So that same battle and trying of the relationship and that dynamic that we see happens in the marital relationship, right? That's why you have to know how to protect your union and you have to know what your purpose and role is individually as well as collectively. I like to tell people, and this is from Gottman, that there's a me and a we in the relationships.
Mhm.
And one of the downfalls also comes from when people are too focused on one or the other. You can be too focused on the selfishness. The me is me, 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 make me happy.
Mhm.
You can be, you can fall from that, Or if you lose completely who you are and you just focus on the we, that's unhealthy too,
Yes.
right?
To
Like,
enmesh.
although you are
Mm.
that word enmeshed, right? Like you are created to be one flesh and you still have an individual calling in your life,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
So those callings are supposed to work in unison, right? Even how you were saying, there's different ways that we protect each other. You can't see yourself as like unimportant or I just gotta do whatever you say. No,
Uh-huh.
you've lost focus. So
Now, is
I
that
can
where no, look, I hear you because the other thing, Esther Perel's work, and she talks a lot about
mm,
how we have this innate need for both connection and separateness. And if we
yes.
don't honor both of those needs, then like the woman, let's just talk women in particular, will
Yeah.
overcompensate. It's either hyper independent or hyper, my identity is my man. And it's like both of them are too
Yeah.
extreme.
Yes, both of those are very unhealthy places to be in. And so going back to femininity,
Mm.
if you want to operate in femininity, what is vital is for you to understand first and foremost, what does that even mean? Because some women are they're trying to display femininity by saying that I can do it all. Right.
Oh,
I don't, man, I can do it all, baby.
uh-huh.
Watch me drive. I'm in my season.
What is the season? Wait, tell me, what is it?
Listen, I don't know, man. Like I'm in my
Okay,
sheet
I was
season.
like,
I don't
maybe it's
know. I don't know.
yeah, but it's
I don't
something.
know. But like just focus on like, I can woman hear me roar. But when you are so focused on separating yourself, right? Then you're putting more burden on yourself. You
Say
can't
it
really operate in
again.
feminine
Yeah.
girl. You put too much of a burden on yourself. How can you operate in your femininity if you're carrying all of the burden that was not intended for you?
Mhm.
You can't. You can't. So you start to mold into masculinity, right?
Yes, yes.
So yeah.
And what does that okay, so in a marriage, what is the impact of that?
Ooh,
You want that covering and that protection, but you're so and I believe, it's past hurts, generational patterns and all of that. You are hyper independent, hyper in your me phase. You get in your masculine, and then what happens in the relationship or the
then your
marriage?
husband, yeah. So your husband starts to feel emasculated, whether or not he says it, right? And in that feeling, again, let's presume he doesn't say anything, right? But in his feeling emasculated, what happens is now he has a defensive posture towards you. So now he's short with you, and you're like, what?
Mm.
Like, why you just always mad? You just always it's because he has been forced into a feminine role, right?
Yeah.
A feminine energy, right? Because you are formed, you've been now shaped into the masculine because you've made no purpose for him. You've not held space for that man, right? So now he's on guard because subconsciously he's trying to prove himself to you. And
Oh.
because he subconsciously feels that, that's where that defensiveness is coming from. So now you two are competing and you butting heads all day long. So
Mhm.
your marriage is constantly in chaos. It's like we cool. Then Keisha, it's just something that happened. And I don't even know why we get here. It's because of that you're carrying it.
Yes. So are women have you found how do you because I find it like it's a very delicate dance, and I love the way you explained it to help women understand the power of falling back to their femininity. And it gets to the word that get causes a lot of controversy, which is submission. And this is big in Islam. Um, but, like, how do you walk that tightrope with women and getting them to understand that there could be power in
Yes.
falling back in submission in, these other ways of being?
Yes. So two things I'm gonna say. To immediately answer your question, I'm gonna say you regain power because you're carrying what you were made to carry. You've offset things that are not intended for you. So you can now fully operate in that by submitting and saying, like, oh my gosh, I don't have to show for that. Baby, what? You got that? Okay. You know?
Uh-huh.
So I think that's one way. And then I also want to speak to in in the Bible, when it talks about submitting, it actually says one to another, right? We focus on wives submit to your husband. But it also says in Christian, culture, it says that husbands submit to your wives, right? Like so much so that the Bible will outline that husband, if you're not treating that woman right, guess what? It won't go well for you, friend. God won't listen to your prayers, is what scripture says. Okay. So like I don't want my women to hear like, well, I just gotta do what he want all the time. No, 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 no. Submit one to another.
Mhm.
There's a partnership. That's why, again, two become one flesh because there's an intermingling that we do in our lives. So when you talk about how do you get to that power, what is that power? I read a post from there's a apostle here in Dallas, Texas, and she put a post. Her name is Apostle Cherie or Prophet Cherie. She asked on her post recently that one of the most underestimated things is rest, and the enemy will like use our negative perspective of rest because we'll be like, oh, if I rest, I'm lazy, or if I'm resting, I'm unproductive, I'm not purposeful. But
Mhm.
rest serves a purpose, right? Like when we think about like the world operates on seasons, there's a
Mhm.
season for rest. So life, there's a season to fall back. That's a part of your relationship dynamic.
Yes.
Like
Mhm.
you gain power when you can say, oh, you got that baby. Now let me watch you work. Oh, I love it. You know what I'm
And put
saying?
my
So
feet up while
that's
I watch you and
and put
relax.
my feet up while I watch you, right? And then it empowers him. So now his guard is dropped. So he's not operating in defensive energy, right? And the true power is the true what hashtag couple goal, if you will, is
Uh-huh.
that now we're working together.
Mhm.
It's not
Mhm.
about me fighting against you. It's not about you proving anything to me. We're working in unison. And that's where my power is. That's
Mhm.
where I can fully operate in my identity as woman. And I can compliment you and you compliment me.
It's so beautiful, right?
Mhm.
I can picture you painting that picture for a woman to help her bring her guard down because it's probably from hurt and not knowing, not seeing it done right or being hurt in the past. So I could see you just painting that picture and it just like for her falling into relaxation
Mm,
or just
yes.
ease, right? And
That
that gets me to I wanted to ask you how do you feel couples because it sounds like as you're counseling and coaching and working with couples, you're educating them. That's what we do, right? There's a form of but we're not sitting at a chalkboard, but like
right.
you're like we're educating because people need guidance. But how do you think couples can be intentional about breaking some of these generational curses either in relationships
Mm,
or parenting or how they view love or like because a lot of couples are getting married they want to do it differently. Some had a great
mhm.
example but a lot didn't and they want to do
Yeah.
things right. So how can they think about just being intentional about some of what you said?
Yes, I love that question. The first thing I'm going to say is actually look back and figure out what are the generational curses.
Mhm.
Because sometimes people are carrying and repeating cycles and they don't even realize it. Right. So I would say first get wise and understand what those are. Because if you're short sighted and just thinking that I want to do what my mom and daddy did, your motives are gonna be kind of offset,
Mhm.
right? You're
Mhm.
gonna be running in a direction trying to be the opposite of something and not have full understanding. Therefore, if you don't have full understanding, you can't approach it strategically.
Mhm. Mhm.
I wanna talk people up to wisdom, right? So go and understand like what is in my family line, right? So step one. And then step two, check your heart posture, right? Like, okay, am I just doing this because I don't want to look like my daddy did, or I don't want to be the woman my mama was, right? Check your heart posture and what your motives are. And then you can start building strategy, right? So I was going to say, I lost my train of thought, y'all.
Mhm. But I
Um,
get I like that, like, build not being so reactive. Because I see
yes.
we either idealize or we vilify, so it's like, "I'm not my
Yes.
ancestors," or, "Why can't we do it like grandma and grandpa?" And it's like, okay, it's different times, but I hate when I hear people downgrading those who came before us, you don't have to
Mm,
do it exactly like they did, but have compassion for why they even did it like that in the first
yes.
place, you know,
Y
versus like just saying, I'm not going to do it like that. Where, like you said, if you're not aware, you're likely, we both probably seen it. You're going to repeat what you don't examine, whether you like it or not.
exactly. Mm, mhm.
You're
Yeah,
definitely.
and the third step I would say is just get biblical wisdom. Right? So
Mm-hmm.
examine, check yourself, and then get wisdom, gain wisdom. If you just out here again trying to be wise in your own eyes, that's folly, right? You gonna fall. It's gonna be hard. You're gonna be confused. You're gonna be exhausted, right? So when you go and get biblical wisdom, then you find the strategy. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, okay. Let me remember whose I am. That's who, not just who
Uh-huh.
I am, but let me remember whose I am. Then you got to do that identity check, right? Because you'll be out here believing the lies, or you'll be just trying to repeat and model what you saw somebody else do. I hate how I saw my mama do it, but I loved how my friend down the street, her mama was amazing. I would just do that. That may
Oh,
not be the strategy
I'm
for you,
sure you've
friend,
heard, yeah.
right?
Just looking for
So,
anything, any kind of straw to hold on to.
right. But
Yeah.
you may not be equipped like that person was equipped, and that might not be your story to repeat. So,
Mhm,
yeah.
mhm.
Get biblical
So,
wisdom.
as a Christian woman and therapist, and I'm a Muslim woman, and we both seem to share this belief in a higher purpose, God's design for marriage, but we both work with people of all backgrounds and faiths
Mhm.
and walks of life. How do you think people from different faiths and different just ways of believing can apply some of these principles to love and commitment in marriage?
Yeah. So the application first starts with you,
Mhm,
right? Like you have to determine what you want for yourself. You have to determine what your like identify and understand what your purpose is. And that's how you can enter and then do the work. Like what you're learning, these healthy dynamics of what marriage is meant to be, do the work to mold into that.
mhm,
Right. And I hope and pray that that is relief for people, right? That you don't have to just figure it out. Again, I believe that marriage was God's idea. So guess what? There's a cheat code. We are
the
exhausting
quickness are
ourselves like
there.
they are there.
Mhm,
So you don't have
mhm,
to exhaust yourself and try to like just like imagine something new, right? Like go to the cheat code and say, the source, what was your great plan? Now let me, meditate on that, mold my heart to that, and then operate in it and
mhm.
begin to honor your spouse, right? Oh, let me say this.
Okay, yes, I wanna hear it.
Just because you might be, so let's say just your women are listening,
Uh-huh.
right? And they don't have their husbands or their boyfriends or their future partners bought into what we're talking about, right? You don't want to learn this and then condemn somebody else for not knowing it.
Ooh, speak on, so you've seen, like, tell us more about that.
So, what I'll see is that one person might grow and they'll be like, oh, I'm showing up so differently and I'm so intentional. But my spouse, ugh, they're
He's
not
not doing the
trying.
work. Uh-huh.
Mhm. So now you're creating discord. Why? That's not the point of us giving
Uh-huh.
you this information, is to cause discord. No. So have grace and compassion
Mhm.
because they are not learning what you're learning and they may not be eating and digesting at the rate you are.
Yeah.
So be kind and compassionate and just graceful and share, right? And have intentional conversations.
Mhm.
Again, you're becoming one flesh. So get on the same page. Like, hey, you know what? I read this in scripture. What do you think about it? Let's digest it. Some people have marriage mentors. Let's take it to our mentors, or let's just go before God and pray and see if we get the same understanding about it. So then we can begin
Not me.
operating in it.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Hello.
Okay, so you're getting from that selfish more to the middle of connection and collaboration.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, I want to make sure people know how to get in touch with you. But before we end, and I've just loved this conversation so much, can you give a woman who is just feeling lost, she feels like her marriage is breaking apart, or her relationship that she feels she put so much work into that is falling apart. she's feeling despondent, she's just feeling
Mhm.
lost, what is one step she can take to get a little bit closer to being aligned with her purpose or her purpose in her marriage? What is one thing she can do?
Yeah, I have a lot of ideas, but
Mhm.
I'll say this, use your ratio. When I say that you have two ears, one mouth. So seek to understand instead of exhausting yourself any further and you going and say, well, how else can I get better? I get better. I get better. Slow down and
Mhm.
invite your partner onto the journey with you. So
Mhm.
seek to understand their point of view, their needs. How do they see the different trials? How have they been wounded from them? And then grow together.
Yes. I think that is a beautiful place for us to stop, and it gives women permission to fall back and not do all
Mhm.
the work, right? Like I love that, the
Yes.
ratio. Just fall back, relax, give yourself some grace. I think that was beautiful. Thank you
Mhm.
so much, Keisha. Where can people connect with you? Where should they follow up with you?
Yes. So if you want to meet me in the coaching space, you can follow me on Facebook. It's just Keisha Williams. I have a Facebook group that's called the Marriage Lifeline. If you DM me just Lifeline,
Uh-huh.
I'll invite you into that group. I do weekly. Every single Thursday, I do a live training on a marriage topic. You can also, if you want to find me in the therapy space, now let me give the caveat as again, our ethics are
Uh-huh.
different. So if you're looking for a marriage therapist, or for me to be your marriage therapist, I only serve those in the state of Texas and the state of Washington,
Okay.
in Florida. So you can just look up
And we'll put
thejourneytobetter.com
it on the
uh,
show notes
show
as well.
notes.
Uh-huh.
Yep. So you can find me on there and you can reach out and do a consultation with me.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. And I think for all of the women who are on your feminine energy journey and just trying to lean into your feminine essence, I hope you got a lot out of this, whether you're married, planning to get married, contemplating marriage. This has been so important. And of course, I'll put a link to my book, The Boundaries to Bliss Blueprint for Women Who Are Finally Ready to Win at Love, and also the Boundaries to Bliss Society, my community for women who want to step into their femininity, healthy boundaries, and fulfilling relationships. Thank you so much, Keisha, and I will see you all next time.